Legal cases, legal issues, legal matters. You're watching WFTV's Law Talk with anchor Christopher Heath and expert legal analyst, attorney Mark NeJame.
All right, let's talk about some of the current issues, cases, and legal matters that our viewers are talking about. Joining me today is legal analyst Mark NeJame of the NeJame Law Firm, and Eric Barker, a senior partner in the criminal division there. And part of the reason we have Eric here today is we're talking about drug laws, both state and federal, because this is an area of the law that really has some very tough penalties associated with it.
It does, Chris, and it's interesting because you hear some commentators, some people indicate, oh, we're so soft on drug laws, we're so soft on crime, and the reality of it is that the United States has 4, maybe 5% of the world's population, but yet 25% of the world's prison population. And so we have very, very hard laws when it comes to drugs. Now, they've become more progressive, more modified over the last handful of years because the courts and legislatures have started realizing that we've thrown a lot of people in prison for possession or people who have drug addiction issues, which then puts them into the world of using and selling and matters such as that. So we've started becoming more sensitive and open-minded, realizing that just throwing somebody in prison is not going to be the solution. If you have an addict and they go to prison and they're untreated and they come back out, they're still an addict. And when they have all those now burdens of felony convictions and all that, they're going to go back into that. So it's about high time that we started recognizing that and addressing that. But we have some very, very strict laws still in the books when it comes to mandatory minimum sentences, both state and federal.
And mandatory minimums, Eric, that's something that people may have heard that term before. It's a little self-explanatory insofar as this is the minimum sentence, but in a legal context, mandatory minimum essentially means if you get convicted, you know where the floor is. The ceiling could still be very high, but you know where the floor is, and that floor could be pretty high itself.
Right. The ceiling is 30.
Yeah.
But you can have minimum mandatories of 3, 15, 25, based on the amount of the drug that you have. And it really doesn't take that much. For instance, if I get a prescription bottle of oxycodone, just that one bottle, that's drug trafficking if I give it to someone that doesn't have a prescription. And that can be a 15-year minimum mandatory, because the law doesn't take into account just the amount of the drug. It also takes into account, when you're weighing it, the acetaminophen or the other substances that are in the pill. So you can have enough for drug trafficking just holding someone's prescription bottle.
And this is an area of the law where this is set by legislative bodies, be it Congress or be the Florida legislature. And to a certain extent, judges, their hands are tied. They can't look at this and say, oh, well, you know, I'm going to use some discretion here. It's mandatory.
And it's a great frustration of many judges because they are the ones that get to really hear about the case, not some legislator who is afraid to say we need to become more understanding of what's involved. The judge hears the stories, hears the sides of them, hears from the prosecutor. And prosecutors might, in fact, want to be able to lower it sometimes, but because of office policies or matters such as that, or disproportionate sentences by, you know, one person has a case, but they have certain mitigating circumstances and another might not, it might look wrong. So there's real, hands are tied in a lot of instances. And it can be, the state charges can be far more serious than federal charges. 1 ounce of heroin, fentanyl, heroin, in the federal system can be 10 years mandatory minimum. In the state system, 25 years. For 1 ounce of heroin. Now, I'm not advocating in any way, shape, or form the use of heroin. I am saying, though, that if somebody is an addict and they're on the street and what they're doing is selling to support their own habit, does that person, in fact, deserve 25 years in prison? Some might say yes, but the reality of it is that depending upon the individual circumstances, so that it can be fairly evaluated, to throw 25 years on somebody who might be 18 years old, 19 years old, who came from an addicted family, that could be rather challenging. And then when they get out, what's going to happen to them? You know, they're going to go right back into that unless we come up with some other areas. And so, yes, we have very, very tough drug laws. They become more and more moderate. You see that particularly with marijuana. You see marijuana dispensaries on every street corner anymore. So there has been an issue that's evolved in that area. But now we look back and we go, how many people went to prison for marijuana? How many people now can't get a job, or forever going to be a felon unless, in fact, it's removed because of marijuana, which is now very illegal in many, many areas.
And this is, and Eric, briefly, I mean, it's one of those things where people need to be aware that, you know, if you are caught up in this, either through use or some other, the law is going to come down on you probably pretty hard.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a big disservice to call it drug trafficking, because you don't have to be a drug trafficker. When people hear drug trafficker, they think, oh, I'm not a seller. I'm not making a lot of money off this. I'm a user, or sometimes I give some pills or something to my friends. It doesn't matter if you're selling. That's not drug trafficking. It's simply possession over a certain amount.
Yeah, and that's one of those things where the law gets very strict and sets a lot of, guidelines in place that, as a friend of mine, Eric Weiser, who used to be with Florida Tax Watch, used to say, hard on crime is hard on taxpayers. We lock people up for a long time because of this. It costs money, and we're not always treating them right.
And I will say that the way the laws evolved, there are a lot of drug cases that are extremely defensible, because there are questions that surface as it relates to searches and seizures and the legality of the stops and the weight and all those things enter into it. But the best kind of war to win is the one you have to get in the first place. Don't do it. But if you do, there are areas, and there are very sensitive prosecutors out there and law enforcement I've experienced, that when they understand the whole story, there's an opportunity for help and rehabilitation. But the penalties are strict. People need to stay away.
Yeah, sometimes the law doesn't catch up quite as fast to society. Eric, thank you. Mark, as always, thank you very much. If you'd like to see more of these law talks, visit our website, wftv.com/legal, or join us each week right here on Facebook. I'm Christopher Heath, and thanks for watching.
WFTV's Law Talk was brought courtesy of the Personal Injury and Accident Division of NeJame Law.